Hi, and welcome to the IDOC Focal Point podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Steve Vargo, and it's a pleasure to talk with Bill Gerber today, and I appreciate him coming on to the podcast. Bill, this is usually the part I introduce the guest, and I just thought, nobody knows you better than you, so maybe I'll just give you a minute or so to talk about you. Who is Bill Gerber? I think maybe a lot of people have probably seen you speak, seen you on social media, writing articles, that sort of thing, but go ahead and just give me a little bit of background on you.
Well, thanks, Steve. I appreciate the invitation and the opportunity to be here. So I'll go back a little ways. I am a Southern California native. I was raised in a place called Del Mar, California, and I live very close to that place now in a town called Solana Beach. We have our business here, just literally down the street. I'm at home today. And I got involved in the optical industry sort of on a fluke. Honestly, I was just finishing up college and I was dating a gal, and her dad happened to run an eyewear company. And after him encouraging me to stop seeing his daughter, he realized I was going to be around for a while, I guess. And so he offered me a job as a sales rep. That company is called Neo Style Eyewear. And I had the good fortune of marrying his daughter, having 3 great kids, and working for him for about 12 years. His name was Helmut Eigel, and I appreciate everything he did for me, which is to give me kind of a carte blanche to travel the country, US and Canada and Europe too, and learn the industry. And so I worked in the industry, in the frame business as a sales rep and a sales manager, marketing director. And I always had a thing for design. My dad was an architect, and he's quite accomplished modern architect. And I never really wanted to be in architecture because he'd always complain about it. But I always was into design, so I started doing a lot of displays and POP and things like that in when I was with NeoStyle. And then I had this idea: let's start a company doing merchandising. So I started a company called Delectable Display, ran that for the better part of 10 years, and then sold that off and did a lot of independent consulting for eyewear brands, independent ODs, chain operations, and the like on customer experience, sales, merchandising, marketing, and performance enhancement, really around the optical side of the business mostly, but all sorts of things. And during that time, we got a lot of requests from clients to actually fulfill the recommendations that we were making as consultants. And so that's when I started OMG, Optical Marketing Group. Started that about 7 years ago. And so we're running that. We have a whole team of interior designers, other designers as well, production people and so forth. And we build out complete spaces and do all sorts of signage and graphics to really make an incredible consumer patient experience. And then we started Contentlinq about 4 years ago to bring digital signage to the space. And so between those two, it's keeping me very, very busy. And we have a fabulous team here in San Diego that works with ODs all over the US and Canada now.
Bill, you mentioned a couple things there. You mentioned the customer experience. You mentioned obviously the design component is a big part of your background and your expertise. I don't know if you've ever heard this, but I've heard this before, that in any experience, we're most likely to remember the beginning and the end. And I've always really leaned heavily into first impressions. When somebody walks into a practice, I even took that into consideration when I was practicing, and my first interaction when I walked into the room, that's what they're going to remember. A lot of things happen in between. It's kind of like a movie. You're more likely to remember the beginning and the end. You forget a lot of things in the middle.
True.
I'm curious from your vantage point in terms of creating that first impression in the optical, because somebody walks into the practice, they open the door, they walk in. A lot of times, I think it should be one of the first things they see is that retail side. Can you speak to that? I mean, how do you approach that in your design and your philosophy?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think it's evolved, definitely, especially over the last 10 years. Before, when we were designing practices, we'd really think about the the physical space, as really it, right? You walk in, you get that impression, but now we really think about the digital impression that people have, because we know in our category, this is one of the most searched categories, and typically people are looking at the Google reviews or looking at the pictures of the place and so forth. So we like to take into consideration what that image is that people have online first, and then make sure that that image goes together properly with the physical space.
Mm-hmm.
So, and we do a lot of work with our clients to make sure that we understand the vibe that they're trying to project, and really the impression. Are they tech forward? Is it more of a homey type of place? Is it personalized service, or is it we have 1,500 frames to choose from? So we really want to make sure that within really the first 5 seconds of entering the facility, that somebody has a very clear understanding of what this place is about. So, and there's a lot of factors that certainly go into that, but I think they say, and we've all heard it before, you don't have a second chance to make it first impressions. When you open that door, you have to have a wow experience. Otherwise, it could go downhill from there.
Yeah, well, that's a good point. But you're also saying that starts even before they come in the digital aspect of it too, and the website and the marketing. And that's a good point. I go to so many websites that are just the stock photo of other people and other, but actually starting to communicate that even before they come into the office.
Yeah, no doubt. I see, quite frankly, so many ineffective websites. And then also, people oftentimes, I don't think, recognize the fact that there's Google photos. When you pull somebody up, there's photos right there. There's photos of the outside. They're pulling photos from Facebook, Instagram, and other places. And those things all do create a first impression. And it's pretty safe to say that a lot of people are deciding to not visit a specific practice based on that impression. And they're looking for the place that aligns more closely with what makes them comfortable and what perhaps turns them on from a retail perspective.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, I think that goes a long way toward that first perception and getting people to want to actually visit the optical. There's a sort of disconnect sometimes when you start looking at even some metrics around capture rates and things like that. Patient comes in, they go in for their exam. Doctors who are complaining about not selling a lot of frames or low capture rate. And I'm pretty sure a great way to not sell a pair of glasses is make sure the patient never gets to the optical. So if for no other reason, how do we, and having that great imagery, and that great optical helps at least reinforce that. But maybe this is a topic that you could speak to as well on the doctor's side, because there's a lot of differences of opinion in what the doctor's role should be in quote unquote selling. And I know doctors don't really like that term, but what would you say they should be doing in the exam room to get the patient to go visit the optical? Even if they're not 100% sold on buying glasses, there's got to be something that happens there that at least gets them motivated to want to go visit the optical and talk to the optician.
Yeah, no question about it, Steve. I think that research has proven out the fact that most people decide if they're going to visit the optical pre-exam. Okay, and if you have a crusty old optical or something that's just okay but not great, people are making that decision. So I think a lot of it certainly starts with the first impressions and whether or not the waiting area is combined with the optical. I mean, we know just alone, and I'll get to the idea of what's happening in the exam lane and answer your question. But we know for a fact that just one simple thing of blending the waiting space and the optical can have a sales differential of as much as 40%. So people like to browse and so forth. But one thing that I've seen that really works is really a system of lifestyle discussion, lifestyle questionnaires, and a system that also incorporates a written optical treatment plan. I've seen so many practices, and we've helped literally hundreds of practices get up and running on the system. But the whole thing is to find out as much as possible as we can about that individual that you're dealing with. Are they on the computer? Obviously, are they a bird watcher? Are they a swimmer, or a hiker, or a biker, whatever? What's their thing? What do they do? And then how does the RX tie together with those lifestyle needs.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that big part of it too, Steve, is making sure that people are very tuned in to the idea, and this is from the doctor's perspective, the idea that a single pair solution is really only addressing one finite part of an individual's needs. And in my case, I'll tell you, through the course of the day, I wear 3 or 4 different pairs of eyewear. And, I want to have optimal vision during all my waking hours. And I think that's the approach that really works. And I think what's been really interesting, especially as people have been reopening, is this idea of taking more time and learning more about the patient, really getting to understand what that person's all about. And I'm hearing reports. In fact, I was on a call earlier today with a doctor in Texas who said that their May was up 22% over last year's May, and they are seeing 70% of the patients. I said, what is it? And he said, well, we're just taking time. And he said, we had always rushed to efficiency and processing patients as fast as we could. Now, he goes, I think we're rethinking everything now.
Mm-hmm. I'm hearing that too from a lot of practices that are saying that we kind of been forced to change our model. And it's, some doctors are looking at it and saying, what do we want to keep? I mean, there's some things here that we're doing that's actually working, that we're able to see, we're able to measure. And I think we are, now I don't know from a volume standpoint, some offices have gone to a model that's probably not sustainable long-term, seeing one patient an hour. But where do we really bump up the level of service where we can maybe see more? Maybe we need to improve efficiencies or things like that allow us to spend more time with the patients. So, I'm about ready. This is one of the benefits of doing your own podcast, Bill. You get to promote your own crap. So I got a book coming out in July, and it's on this topic. It's really, how do we get people to go from hearing information to acting on it? And the first chapter is called Curiosity is Caring. And it really leans into the idea that we need to really learn, like you just said, what's important to them. As consumers, we're incredibly narcissistic. We can be great people, compassionate people, empathetic people, but we just operate from a different part of the brain. But when you go into consumer Steve, we become very, what's in it for me? So the best way you can approach that, whether you're selling a pair of glasses or trying to get somebody to be more compliant with medication, is really trying to find out what are their drives, what are their motivations, what's important to them. And I think we're seeing that play out with a lot of these offices.
I'm excited about your book. I'm looking for some good summer reading, and I can't wait to read it.
I've been working on it for about 2 years, and it really, I tell you, the frustration that I keep hearing is that we are, doctors, they'll say we're educating, we're informing, and they can do that till they're blue in the face. But if patients don't act on the information, then you're not really all that impactful. You're just educating people, but they're not doing anything. So I really sought to better understand, how do you actually motivate people to change in ways that benefit their vision, their health, and their well-being. So my hope is that it gives them some tools to be more effective with doing that.
It's really interesting. My partner in our software company, Contentlinq, is a gentleman named Azar Zubri. He's a very, very accomplished software engineer. And it wasn't until we joined forces that about 4 years ago that he entered the optical space. He's been wearing glasses since he was, I think, 10 years old. And he said until he started working on digital lens demos, he had never heard of computer lenses. Okay? Never heard of computer lenses. He's in his mid 40s, later 40s now. And sorry if I revealed that, Azar, but you're so youthful looking. But in any case, he said, you know what? He started working these demos. What is a computer lens? How can that benefit me? And I asked him just off the cuff one day, what would that have been worth to you all these years after now owning computer lenses and benefiting it? He said, I don't know, 5-10 grand a year.
Yeah.
Really? So very, very interesting opportunities that exist to help people get what they need and want.
So, and I think we've halfway answered the next question I was going to ask you, but in terms of price, I think a lot of people do walk in, and we do it too as consumers when we're in the market for something that maybe we don't understand real well. I think it's safe to say that the average consumer who's not an optometrist, who doesn't have background in eye care, doesn't really understand lenses and frames and quality very well, and probably does walk through the door of an optometry practice with price on their mind. What does my vision insurance, my benefits cover? Some offices are much more effective than others at getting people's mind off price. So can you speak to that? I mean, what do you see? And obviously a big part of your brand is built around that, creating that first impression, value. I mean, if I were to ask you all my patients care about is price. I don't really think that's true, but that's what we hear. What would your response to that be?
Yeah, I think price is a super legitimate concern, and price is where our brain goes when we are commoditizing things, right? That's the first place you go, and it's no wonder that people are so into price in our space, because we've done it to ourselves, right? BOGOs, 2 for $29, online plays. And so it's really the commoditization. It's just hanging out with my parents last night, and my dad said, gosh, because I just went down to such and such a place, and he had an exam last week. He said, their stuff's really expensive. I said, compared to what? He said, well, you could go online and you could get a pair for $49. And he said, but I know the difference. He goes, I know the difference. And so he kind of like talked himself into this idea that, yeah, it was totally worth it. But I think if that's the thing that we're getting all the time, then I don't think we've done a good job of helping the client or the patient really understand the true value of vision. There's an OD I know in Florida who asks this question at the beginning of every exam. He says, what percentage of your waking hours would you like to see perfectly clear? Right? Very straight face, very earnest in the way that he approaches that. And I believe that sort of idea around vision optimization and around performance optimization will help that portion of your patient base. And I'm not saying that every patient is going to be like, yeah, I'm going to spend $5,000 just because we're talking vision optimization. But I do believe that in the average practice, 60 to 80% of the patient base will move in the direction of quality if they know that you're addressing what's in it for me, right? So that's, I think it's super important that we tell the stories, we share the examples, we make people understand that your life can be a lot better, and here's the associated cost with it.
Yeah, and I think to your father who figured it out on his own, that's great for him. I think for a lot of other people, they need our help. One of the things I even talk about in the book is contrast. There's the neurology is really interesting on how we make decisions, and the part of the brain that we make a lot of our decisions with, it's not the logical, the intellectual side of our brain. In fact, it's more emotionally driven, and it responds to things like visuals. It responds to things like stories. It responds to things like contrast, which is what you're talking about before. Your dad was smart enough to figure it out on his own, but when we don't know the difference between two competing options, then price does become the difference. We have to be able to demonstrate contrast between the two. And we do this every day as ODs. When we ask people which is better, one or two, right?
Yeah.
So when you say one, when the choice is obvious, you're like, you can't wait to answer it. You feel very sure of yourself, right? You got one that's real blurry, one that's clear, which is better, one or two. Oh, that's one. It's obvious. But what starts to happen when that choice isn't so obvious and they start to look alike, right? People become very non-committal to their answers. It's the same thing when you're considering purchasing a product, considering a service. If we can't tell the difference between the two, you become very unsure and you become very non-committal, which is really, it's a great place to be for refraction because that's right where we need you. But for sales and for getting people to kind of move forward, it's really disadvantageous if you're trying to sell something and people can't tell the difference.
Yeah, no question. I think there's a lot of psychology that goes into all of this, right? And we've started to do a lot of work on addressing capture rate, because a lot of our clients, they ask us, well, gee, if I spend $100 grand or 50 grand, whatever I'm going to spend to upgrade my facility, what's my ROI, right? And so, we obviously need to answer that question. And, we have seen these these increases in capture with not only upgrading the space itself so it looks better and it looks more legitimate when somebody's making a $1,000, $2,000 optical treatment plan, but we've also seen all sorts of increases in capture that end up being trackable. And especially on we're measuring satisfaction. Some people just do a net promoter score, which is cool. I like a little bit more depth, but this idea that capture is relative to convenience, and people don't want to go elsewhere to buy glasses, right, or contacts.
You're there,
really
right? You're there, yeah, right.
You're there. Come on, and I think we started to talk about it. One of my newer team members said, it's really, let's not call it capture rate anymore. Let's call it the abuse rate. Kind of turn the tables. And I was like, the abuse rate? Wow, that's really fascinating. So, we start to look at it from those terms and say, okay, what are we doing a good enough job, as practitioners, and in our case, as merchandisers and experience creators, to do everything possible to make staying there and buying the materials that are part of the RX the smart choice, right? And there's a lot of work to it. There's the environment, there's the people, there's the doctor, there's the confidence, there's all these things that have to come together like a well-oiled machine. But when it does, man, that is a beautiful thing.
How what would you say to an office that is, a lot of offices now dealing with online opticals and people can take their scripts and order glasses offline? Obviously there's service components of that that are missing. There's, there quality issues that could be pointed out, but where would you hang your hat on, without sounding desperate, but, and people have the right to buy wherever they want, but what are the biggest things that you would say you're missing out on by not doing your business here with us?
Yeah. So, I'll relate a couple of stories because I think this is particularly relevant. So I have a number of clients who've adopted this, the language of, we believe in complete eye care, right? And to have us fulfill your prescription, that ensures the continuity of care, the cycle of care. And we really feel strongly about that. And they're upfront. Look, you have choices. You can go online, you can go to a competitor, you can go wherever and get your glasses or your contacts. But when you stay with us, you have that part of your life covered. Life's complicated as is. You probably wouldn't, if you went to your dentist, you probably wouldn't go out and say, oh, I'm going to get my crown elsewhere, right? The dentist is just going to provide that. So I think that whole idea of continuity of care is a foundational message that we really have to be promoting. And I think we also need to be bold as an industry and as ODs and people communicating with the patient to stand up and say, look, this is exactly why you should buy from us, right? A lot of people say, oh my gosh, I don't want to ruffle any feathers, but what we provide, and every OD out there has had the situation where somebody comes back with a pair of glasses they bought online, it's not right, sag height's off, whatever, and they end up trying to fix it. But had they been a little more bold at the outset and said, hey, look, stay here, here's why, we can help you. You can check that off your list of life's complications. And it seems to work out really well. Yeah.
We threw around the word last week in some meetings here, compete. And the question came up, is that too strong of a word that doctors need to compete with? And I said, no way. I said, compete away, because they're competing against you. So if you feel like your service is better, your products are better, make sure that people know that. And in some cases too, you're just competing against even their own discretionary money. I mean, you might be, when you're talking about upgrading to a, higher quality, let's just say frame pair of glasses. I mean, you might be competing against a set of golf clubs or designer jeans. So compete, tell the people, make sure that they understand they don't have to buy what you're selling, but in the end, make sure that they have all the information to make a good decision.
Yeah, no doubt. I think the most successful practices that I've had the privilege to work with and meet really over the years, uh, those practices, they stand for something, right? Whatever they stand for, whatever your brand is, your message, not just what it says on your logo or what have you, but really, what everybody's heart and soul says in that practice. But, I see a lot of practices now going to employing tools like signage and digital and all sorts of things that basically make a case, right? Why you should buy from us. So, I have a client I was just talking to the other day, and they had us make some signs for them. It says, why buy your eyewear from us, right? It's on the walls, it's a check-in, it's a checkout. I mean, that's their message. And they said, since we made the decision to increase capture from 42% to a goal of 60%, that was the goal over an 18-month period, and they ended up at 68%, by the way. They said everything's changed. So we're not apologizing for price anymore.
Mm-hmm.
We're proud. Hey, this is your optical treatment plan. You need 3 pair, and it's going to be $1,700 or whatever it is. So I think that's being bold is huge.
Yeah. Well, I think it's a different vibe too when you're honestly going into that, wanting to make sure that your patient gets the best products and the best care for them. Once you understand their need, not just this generic, we sell the best of everything, the best. I don't know what that means, but when, you understand what they really need, but when your mindset is really focused on them, I think you can be more bold and that'll come out a lot more authentically. Because Bill, I just I'm letting you know, I know you talked about getting these online, but I really think you need these lens options for what you're telling me that you need the glasses for. If I'm focused on you, I heard something recently I really liked. It said, I think it was more, I don't think it was specific to optometry. A lot of business owners focus on the success of their business, but if they spent more time focusing on the success of their customer, they lose less sleep. A lot of people lose sleep, or they lose less sleep over the success of their business. And to some degree, the money kind of takes care of itself when my focus becomes making sure that you get the,
no doubt. I mean, I can tell you personally that any time in my career that I've ever focused on money and the outcome, what's in it for me money-wise.
Right.
No, that messes up the deliverable, right?
Yeah.
I focus on, like we're focused on now, how do we take this practice from this capture to this, or this sales to this? And look, I never want to see anybody make changes that don't result in higher patient satisfaction.
Mm-hmm.
You could sell $1 million more, but if your satisfaction plummets, that's not worth it. So I think we can do it all. I think we can, especially now. I mean, a lot of people, look, we just went through massive trauma, and a lot of people are bouncing back, which is great. But I think it's a good opportunity to reset and know that we can have increased capture, we can have increased sales, and just by focusing on making people's lives better.
So let's make some practice owners squirm here a little bit.
Yeah.
What are the biggest mistakes that you see in on the retail side? And that's a really wide, open-ended question. It could be the merchandising, the training, but when you walk into an optical and go, oh my God, what are the things that make you do that? The things that the huge, we'll call them mistakes, oversights that really need to be addressed, like yesterday.
Well, I personally visited around 10,000 practices over the course of my career. So I guess I'm dating myself in that way, but
or just really busy, or both.
Yeah. I mean, not as many lately. Cause I mentioned to get out. I've been visiting some clients lately, but I'm going on my first plane ride next week, so I'm pretty excited in 3 months. But in any case, Steve, I think that there's some very common mistakes that practices are making around the look and feel of their practice. Number one, our attention spans have gotten much shorter, right? We know, people make that goldfish analogy, right? 3-second attention span. So I think there's something called the 3-second rule, and it's really your first impression, to go back to our earlier discussion, around branding, okay? It's not just the practice branding, but the brands that you carry. 9.5 out of 10 opticals that I visit, you walk in, you look around, you see an ocean of frames, right? With no define branding. And what that means to me as a consumer is, oh my God, there's 1,000 frames over there. I don't know what I'm looking at. This could be an arduous experience. So clearly identify brand names, even if they're not brand names that people know. If you're more of an independent brand carrier, by all means, speak those brands proudly. Number one. Number two, bad lighting. There is, this tendency to have similar lighting throughout the whole practice, which, the fluorescent lighting may be fine in the clinical area, but it's definitely not going to cut it in the optical area. The third thing that is pretty outdated today is the giant reception fortress. Okay, that was made for a time when we had big CPUs and we had all that. I think that, if we look at retail in general, that's a really important topic, because that creates a barrier, right? In these reception areas where 4 or 5 people sit behind and can kind of create this distance from the patient. I think that's something that can be off-putting. No one's going to say, oh, you have a giant reception fortress here, and that's a real, I feel put off. It's subliminal. So those are some of the key things. And then also, just on the macro level, is how modern or contemporary or relevant does this place look? I walk into a lot of places, in a variety of different markets. It could be upscale markets or downscale or whatever. And a lot of places just don't look like a place that I would really want to spend my time and my money. So I think that first impressions are huge. That's all important. So. Yeah.
You mentioned that the number of frames initially, and I was on the opposite end of this once, where I was on vacation and my glasses broke, and I had a prescription. So I went to this local optical. And I've told this story before. I didn't mention I was an optometrist because I just didn't want to be treated any differently. And I didn't want, and I don't know everything about fashion. I'm like a lot of ODs that I lean on opticians for that. And so I just didn't even mention it because I needed some help. I needed some guidance.
Sure.
So, but anyway, the optician came up and basically said, I said, I broke my glasses. I'm looking at new frames. And she basically went, okay, well, let me know when you find something you like. And she walked away. And I called her back and I said, hey, can you kind of point me in the right direction here? What are the popular styles right now? What do you think would work on my face? And she basically just pointed out a few different brands where, we're carrying this brand. That's a new line we got over there. Those are lady frames over there. And I really wasn't getting any help from her. And I remember thinking in that optical, wow, this is what it feels like. This is what it feels like to be overwhelmed by choices. I'll tell you, and it was so good to be on the opposite end, because all I wanted was someone to make it simple for me. Like, I just wanted someone to make it simple.
Well, we all know the stylist, the really good stylist is worth their weight in gold, right?
Yep.
So why is it that in a $600,000 optical, quite often, if there's 3 opticians, there's one person doing more than half the business? And that stylist, I love to make the hairstylist analogy. Most people, once they have a trusted hairstylist, they are not leaving that person, right? Even if their prices go up or what have you, there's a lot of loyalty. And I think that's one of the huge opportunities in our business, is to really promote styling and making the process as easy as possible. It's huge. And then also, I think there's this other part of not stopping when somebody is into buying. I think quite often we're into this single pair mentality as an industry. Like, okay, the person came out, they got their exam, they got their RX, I sold them a pair of glasses, $600 sale, next, right? Other times people are like, okay, I'm just getting started.
Yeah.
A very good friend of mine named Bruce, he always tells the story. Bruce has more money than a lot of most people. And he loves eyewear, right? And he always says, me as the representative of the eye care industry, this is his friend, he always says, you guys, just when I'm getting going, you're like done with me and ready to put me out the door. So stop that.
Yeah. Sometimes we can be the obstacle to a sale or a further sale as well. So I just got two more questions for you,
Yeah.
Bill. One is in eye care, we see a lot of training, and even on this end of it, probably not enough with opticians around the tactical side of the job,
Sure.
the knowledge, the optics, frame adjustments, different lens options. But there's oftentimes a lack of actual selling skills and actual the ability to, and I think do a lot of the things that we're talking about. I think selling, that word scares a lot of people because they immediately assimilate it with the people who don't do it right, or the people who are pushy or make you feel like they're twisting your arm, all the things that we would never recommend. And it's, sometimes you get the quick sale there, but it's not sustainable. But people that are really good at that, they're good at connecting with you really quickly. They ask questions. They're genuinely curious, I found, and they're able to get out of you what's important to you. I think they genuinely care about the other person, want to help them. And by God, that's next thing you know. I mean, that's selling. I mean, once it converts over into them actually connecting a solution to a problem you're having or some kind of a need you want. But gosh, there's such a lack of that in optometry practices. And yet the retail side is such a big component of the success of that practice. What are your views on that? And how do you address that?
Yeah, look, I spent a lot of years, especially when I was in the frame business, working on sales training, optician sales training. I sold a high-end line and was responsible for its growth. And I realized after many, many years that was kind of pushing the rock uphill. Last year I did 52 seminars. Interesting. That's an interesting number. But in any case, one of the questions I asked, I have a series of 10 to 12 questions I asked depending on the group. The one question is, how many of you consider yourselves salespeople, right? In a room of 100 people, 2 hands go up, right? Then I asked the question, how many of you consider yourselves medical professionals who are in the service industry, right? Everybody raises both hands. So I think a lot of it has to do with perception, self-perception. Am I a salesperson? Am I not a salesperson? So I think the approach is really a systematic approach. We're talking about an optometric practice with an optical. I think the most effective sales outcomes happen as a result of a system, right? The system of finding out as much as you can about that individual, working that into the exam, and then having the patient come out with a multi-pair prescription, if that's appropriate for them. So that's huge. Of course, you have to have people who can connect with people, look them in the eye, smile, be interested. That's key. And that's difficult to train. Obviously, you can't train personality, but you can train on process. We're working on software right now that bridges the gap in optical. It's called Sherpa. I'll put in my little product plug. And I wish we had it out before COVID because everybody wants it. But, to really help with workflow and help with, reminding the patient and the optician what the doctor's RXs were and recommendations. So I think the selling part is everyone can improve on that. But I think also a lot of it's stepping out of your comfort zone because, we do what we do, right? But until we're challenged. So I encourage everybody to try, to ask for that additional sale, or, if you're not used to selling certain coatings or what have you, just bundle that together, but make the buying process easy and to connect it back with the patient needs, right? Their stated needs. You mentioned that you're on the computer all the time. Here's a solution, right? You mentioned that you're out riding your bike all the time. Here are these fantastic wraparound frames. Here is a solution. So I think that's, we simply present the solutions. The other part too is about financing. Now it's a little bit tighter economically for some people than before. So I really encourage everybody to look at, do you have financing in place, in-house, out-of-house, what have you? Because I would much rather see somebody get what they need. And, if they need to finance it, take it over time, than, end up with only a partial solution.
Yeah. That's a good point before too, because you hear from different offices that do things a little bit differently, and there's not always one way to be successful. But I think sometimes just trying it a different way, just trying something, ask a question a different way, or ask a question you didn't ask before, or get out of your comfort zone a little bit and and propose something in a new way and just see what the results are. I think you learn through that. Well, okay, people weren't really interested in the way I was mentioning this before, but now if I do it this way, or if I show them a visual of it or some way, but best practices as well. And I tell, the times I hear, a lot of times it's an OD or maybe a manager that'll say, yeah, we've got 2 opticians. One is really good and the other one's not so good. How do I fix the one who's not so good? And it's like, well, why don't you have her hang out with the one that is good and see what she's doing differently and see if some of those things are transferable. Now, it may just be that she's got these qualities that the other one maybe doesn't possess, but I agree with you. I think it's one of those things, selling leadership. There's just certain things that we could probably always get better at. Might not be great at it, but I think we can, there's definitely room for improvement from what I've seen.
It's interesting too. You mentioned that about opticians perhaps shadowing each other. I always encourage ODs to do the same. I cannot tell you how many practices I visited where the ODs have never sat in on an exam, right? They may have been working together for 20 years in the same space, but it's like, because that level of consistency can also cause challenges for the support staff, right? So you have an optician, and I get this all the time when we do group meetings where opticians will say, oh, well, Dr. Bob does it totally different than Dr. Sally, right? And so that becomes very, very much of an opportunity to look at, I want everyone to keep their own style and do what they do, but also look at it, how does it affect the outcomes, right? So that's very interesting. But also from the selling standpoint, to go back to that for a second, I think it's really important that we all accept the fact that we are all in sales, and then to wear it proudly, right? To never be ashamed of what you're quoting or what you're offering, because what we do in this business is we change lives, right? And we make people better, and that's worth a lot of money.
Yeah. Well, I think change is key. I mean, that's really what I've been giving a lot of thought to and putting time into. And even with this book, it's actually called Prescribing Change, because I want to get past the point where we're just educating, but nothing happens, nothing changes. The only way you really change lives is you get the patient to change something in a way that benefits them. Otherwise, they're just passively hearing the information, but not acting on it. So you're right, we do, but I think we are always selling. I mean, and I don't mean that necessarily in the traditional sense of the word, but for us to be able to motivate other people to change in some way. And I think we should be focused on that if you really want to make a difference in people's lives. Did you go to school just to educate people, or did you really want to make a difference? If you want to make a difference, they have to do something different. But we need to learn the skills, I think, to be able to sell them on change and get better.
No question. I feel like I might step in some hot water saying this, but ODs are among the nicest people I have ever met, right? As a group, ODs are nice people. ODs recommend, but a lot of times ODs don't prescribe. And that's the difference, right? I could recommend all day long, but unless I prescribe, and to the title of your book, I don't see the outcome. And the distinction I see with really high performing practices and those who are just doing okay, is really this, really helping to lead the patient in the right direction. And, and that those patients say, thank you, right? That's great. So, I cannot tell you how many practices where we've encouraged just the change in the terminology, get rid of recommend and move to prescribe.
Prescribe, yeah.
Right. Just that verbiage can make all the difference in the world.
Yeah. Well, you give yourself more confidence too. If we want to be honest with this, I think sometimes the reason we maybe fail to get to that point where we can confidently prescribe and hand somebody something, say, Bill, this is what you need. I think we'd be able to do that more effectively if we did the other things on the front end as well. If I took the time to better get to know you, understand what your problems are, then I'm almost getting excited about what I've got in my arsenal to be able to help you. So at the end, it's much easier for me to prescribe you something because I'm going, Bill, I got you here, buddy. Here you go. This is what you need. And it feels easy. It feels genuine and authentic, where the opposite of that is feeling like I haven't really gone through those steps. And I'm just we prescribe the best care, to everyone. And then I feel like I'm just kind of recommending, like, I don't really know what you need, Bill, for sure. But, there's different options. I'm recommending this because it's the top of the line. But I feel a little bit like, I don't feel real confident with that. So I think there's a difference in approach and just that ability to connect with people understand them. And I think that becomes easier to kind of be able a little bit more bold, like we talked about.
Yeah, be bold. I think that's our rallying cry, is to be bold and be prescriptive and, make the experience fun. I mean, this is a huge part of our work is making fun environments and, really trying to create spaces and experiences that play on the culture, build up the culture of the practice itself. So, the fun element, I can tell you that just about every top practice that I visit that's really kicking, firing on all cylinders, they're having fun with it, right? They're changing lives. They're, helping people look better, see better, and that's great. I mean, what a great profession we're all in.
Yeah, it's a different culture. It's a different feel, office culture at those.
Oh yeah.
Bill, I'm going to end there on fun. Let's take that. Let's roll with that into the weekend. So this has been a lot of fun. So it's always we've talked a few times in the past, and I appreciate you jumping on and picking your brain. And I know you have a lot to offer people with your background. So I really appreciate you spending some time here.
Yeah, we really appreciate the opportunity and what you're doing. Thank you for your contribution to the industry, Steve.
Thank you as well. And so, yeah, this is Dr. Steve Vargo with IDOC. And if you want to learn more about IDOC, you can go to our website, idoc.net. That's idoc.net. I will tell you, one of our core values is better together. So if you're interested in being a part of a community of progressive ODs, a progressive growth-minded community, don't hesitate to reach out. You can contact me directly, svargo@idoc.net, or just go to our website. So thanks again, Bill, and you have a great weekend, and we'll catch up later. Thanks.
Take care.